Bravo, Paul.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. It's funny that those two clips were in the same tempos. And they're written
sounds
like
really nice.
30, 35 years apart.
Very funny. Wow. Amazing. Um, I have few questions for you
Yes.
that I want to share with all the composers also
Okay.
and conductors. And if you could tell us a little bit, I mean, we know that you have toured the world playing your own music. And if you can tell us a little bit about the highlights of your experience doing this.
Well, thank you. I grew up being trained as both a pianist and a composer, but I always kept those separately. When I would usually play concerts, it would be just my music, or then I would be
Mm-hmm.
a regular pianist and just do standard performances of Beethoven, Rachmaninoff, Mozart, and things like that. So I never put them together. It wasn't. I think it was many years, like 15 years ago. I was doing some concerts in Budapest and in Paris, and there was mostly old people. When you do classical concerts, it's mostly people over 50, 50 to 100. And then there was some young person who came to one of my concerts, and they said, "Are you the same Paul Romero who also does computer games?" And I go, "Yes." I go, "How did you know that?" He goes, "Oh, I saw your name on this concert, and it's the same name on a video game that I play." So up until that point, I was never mixing the two worlds of my classical piano career and my composing career. And then in the last 15 years, orchestras in Europe started reaching out to me, wanting me to come and play with them. But I always thought they wanted me to come play a piano concerto like Rachmaninoff. And then they would say, "No, we don't want you to play that. We want you to play your own music." And I said, "Really?" Like, because my music is computer game music. Like, no, no, no. But for us, it sounds like classical music. So little by little, in the last 15 years, as the as the audiences grew up, who played the music for my computer games 30 years ago, now they are adults, and they would somehow make it possible for me to start playing my music from computer games with symphonies. So it slowly in the last 15 years, I really don't do piano concerts anymore of just standard repertoire. Now my concerts are just my own music, and as the
Wow.
more I do it, the audience gets younger. So now, if I play in opera houses like in Europe, the audience tends to be like 30 and younger. But
Yeah.
if I play an opera house and I'm playing a concerto of Rachmaninoff, they're like 60 and older. So it's interesting. In my own lifetime, I've seen the audience change, for me at least. So highlights are that I now I'm having the career that one of my idols was Sergei Rachmaninoff. I loved everything he did in his life. I loved how he played the piano. I loved how he wrote his own music. I loved how he played his own music, and he seemed to have the best of both worlds. So I'm appreciating that I get the opportunity to play my own music now. That I get the opportunity to compose new music for new computer games, and then I also still get to do standard concerts, piano concertos, and standard repertoire. So for me, it's all the same. I'm connected to all this music that I grew up with. I compose in the style of my favorite composers, Prokofiev, Rachmaninoff, Beethoven, Brahms, and so I feel like I'm just continuing their musical language for another era, and a different medium of video games and computer games. So,
Yeah.
but I still see myself as a classical musician, but I just do it for maybe different reasons that other classical musicians do classical music. So,
Yes. Yes. I share with you, I'm opera singer and all my fans are over 80. So
well, not us. we're your younger audience.
I have to share now. I have another question for you. if you can give us an idea of the process for writing a video game soundtrack
Yes.
for the composer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the first thing is to understand what the feeling of the developers. What kind of game is this? What is the residual feelings that you want to have in each of the areas of the game? Number one, like you have to understand what kind of world this game is going to be in. Is it a future world? Is it a past world? Is it a world that is hanging in the universe? There's some games that I've done where they're
Mm-hmm.
even physically what's happening. People are hanging in atmospheres without planets. There's no planets. They're just atmospheres that are sort of floating in the universe. So, and then I just finished a video game where a lot of it takes place way on top of the mountains, like in Bavaria, like in Mad King Ludwig's palace. So even just a visual, you have because that gives you an atmospheric feeling of how the music should be constructed in terms of the orchestration. You know, like for instance, if I'm this one that I did, everything takes place in the mountains of castles. Everything is going upward. The mountains are going upwards. All the castles are going upwards. The cathedrals. So you have to feel like sounds are pointing up towards the sky, but it's all based.
Mm-hmm.
So it's high. We're very high up in the mountains, like a Wagnerian opera. If you hear Wagner operas, there's a lot of French horns and lots of things that feel mountainous. But very different than a game that has that's floating in the universe. It has to have a quality that it doesn't have a heaviness on the bottom. It has to feel that even the sounds can float away. So visually, I have to always study very carefully with the art director and the producer what the visuals feel and how we interface sound with visuals. So I'll come up with a template of orchestral sounds or even created sounds that could possibly be instruments. And before I even begin the actual music, I have to introduce who and what will be the sounds of the soundtrack. So, and I try to show all the instruments to the producer so he can see. It's like choosing 100 people that are going to put on the show. So they have to see who they are, what they sound like, what they feel like when they are playing together, and what kind of emotion it creates as you hear this. So there's a big process of weeks of selecting instruments, sounds that match the visuals. And once we create a template of the actual music makers or the kinds of instruments and sounds we're going to have, then we could begin the process of composition. And then once that happens, then we begin samples of, do we want the music to be very heavy-handed like Mahler or Wagner? Do we want it to be very ethereal and very transparent like Fauré or Eric Satie or Ravel or Debussy? So I start showing them samples of different composers and get a kind of direction of what they feel the musical language should be. So once I begin to show them and they like a little bit of the language of here, a little bit of the language of this Rachmaninoff symphony, a little bit of this Fauré Requiem or this opera, they can understand I'm going to be pulling influences from these sources, like the musical language. So we begin a step by step. And then
Yeah.
once we've agreed to the kind of the harmonic language, the actual orchestrations, then I'll actually begin the composition, and I usually do it maybe like in 30-second increments as little testers. So I just give them a kind of a feeling of what this piece of music will be like, and then they will play it. They'll match it up to their visuals, to the gameplay, and they'll say, okay, yeah, let's proceed with that. So it can be time intensive.
Yeah.
I'm working on a battle theme right now for this other game, and I'm having to use the musical language of the Rachmaninoff First Piano Concerto. Uh, the chords of this piece don't resolve. So it always makes you feel very anxious. And so in battle, it's the same thing. I want that feeling of never ending resolution. But I like the romanticism of these chords that Rachmaninoff used in the concerto. But now I have to pair that with maybe a drive from the planets, like Mars. Like, so I might combine a rhythmic pattern from Mars with a harmonic language of Rachmaninoff, but with these orchestra. I don't know what the orchestrations are going to be. I just needed to have. So I like these sort of key factors, and that's kind of my process. So before, I would just do a piece. 30 years ago, I would just do a piece of music, and I hope they liked it. And then they would say, "This is all wrong. It's the wrong direction. It's nothing at all that we want." Then I'd have to start again. So what I've learned is to partner with my producers step by step by step, so that they feel it and they have some control to help guide me, and so I can ultimately give them what they need and what they want, and it could be a very satisfying project. So
Yes, yes.
that's how I generally work.
Wow, it's a long process as we see, you know. And we have last question
Yeah.
about maybe some composers they want to go to the game industry. What would be the best advice for getting into the video game industry as a composer?
Best way to well, number one, what I found is that you have to have no ego when you work with computer game companies and corporations, because it's a product. And even if you feel, because us as musicians and artists, we think, oh, but I gave my best and I gave my heart and my soul, and it's sort of a cold world out there in the corporate world, because for them it either works or it doesn't work, and so you can't get upset. This is why you have to develop a process of how you work with your producers, and you just don't let your feelings or ego get in the way, because you really have to be
Mm-hmm.
you have to be a team player in these projects,
Mm-hmm.
because so many people working on these games that everybody's hoping for the best, and everybody wants to get the best out of the project. Best way is to I started my career. I wasn't even looking for my career. Somebody just came up to me one day and said, "Oh, can you write some music that sounds like it's from a long time ago, like in the style of Bach or Vivaldi?" So I said, "Sure." So I did the music for a whole week. I got paid like $400, and I never thought I was going to do it again. But then the company liked the music so much, they hired me for the next game, the next game, and so by accident, I ended up doing like 158 games. So that's what I've been doing for 30 years. Best way, but when I started, it was a new company. It was so the best thing is for people who want to go into computer games is to start partnering up with new developers. There's and these days, many people can create games, and there's millions of people out there creating their own games. So you have to partner with people who are also starting their gaming careers, and then you can work together. And it's very hard to come in as a it's I've worked with many companies because I've worked with other companies, meaning that Sony hired me because they knew that I worked with Ubisoft. Ubisoft hired me because they knew that I worked with uh, Tencent. So it's kind of uh, to even get into the industry. For me, I think the best way is to really start with people your own age who are also starting their career, even with smaller games. Even people who are like two or three developers. Everybody needs music, so you have to just get your feet wet, even with people who are at the same level as you are. And I find like that worked with John Williams. John Williams, the great composer, he started working when he was younger. He wasn't really a great famous composer yet, but started working with Steven Spielberg, who was only like 20, 21 when he I forgot what the first movie they did together. It was before Jaws, but he was very young. So John Williams partnered with a very young Steven Spielberg, and they've been together ever since for like
Mm-hmm.
50 years. So partnership is key.
Right.
That's why I say it's find your partners early on and find young developers, but choose well.
Choose well
Choose well.
to go to the top, no?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much
Thank you.
for sharing this. We're gonna go now with Nathan Pangrazio,
Thank
which
you.
I met maybe in 2009, 2010, and then I was so lucky to make that we did a city together. And I'm gonna read a little bit of Nathan. You want to read? No, it's okay. So Nathan is an Emmy Award-winning film composer, pianist, music educator,